Stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Ling. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am continuing my reviews of Dim Carcosa, the 6th Mythos pack in the Dunwich Legacy cycle. This time, I am taking a look at the Seeker cards in the pack. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, like, comment, and subscribe. Seekers receive a couple of great cards in this pack, so let's take a look. The first Seeker card in the pack is Eidetic Memory. It's an event that costs 3 experience points. It has Intellect and Agility skill icons and the Spirit trait. It has the game text, play Eidetic Memory as an exact copy of an Insight event in any investigator's discard pile, including its resource cost. Remove that event from the game. Remove Eidetic Memory from the game instead of discarding it. I'm going to start this review by asking a question. Have you ever wanted to break Arkham Horror's deck building rules and play with 3 or even 4 copies of a certain card? Well, if you're playing Daisy, Rex, Min, or Lola, you can almost do that with Eidetic Memory. Now, there are a few restrictions on what Eidetic Memory can copy. First, it can only copy events with the Insight trait. But that's not really a problem for Seekers. Of the 27 events in the game with the Insight trait, 17 are in the Seeker class, and many of them are extremely juicy targets for this card. Toward the beginning of a campaign, you can copy many of the great level 0 Seeker events, including I've Got a Plan, Mind Over Matter, No Stone Unturned, Preposterous Sketches, Shortcut, and Working a Hunch. Many of these cards see heavy rotation in Seeker decks, so you shouldn't have too much trouble finding a great target for Eidetic Memory. Once you've gained a few experience points and are heading toward the end of a campaign, you can copy Forewarned to cancel all of the Treachery cards, Deciphered Reality to gather all of the clues, or Cryptic Research to draw all of the cards. You can even use Eidetic Memory to target the next card in this pack, the level 5 version of No Stone Unturned. Now, most of these cards require a significant investment in terms of experience points, so if you come up a point or two short of purchasing 2 copies, you could always consider picking up a copy of Eidetic Memory to make the most of the 1 copy that you can afford. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out several interesting targets outside the Seeker class, including Drawn to the Flame, Lola Hayes' signature event, Improvisation, or Sure Gamble, the rogue event from the core set that lets you change a negative chaos token into a positive one. Now, one thing I should mention here is that if you're planning to play Eidetic Memory in your Lola deck, Lola needs to be a Seeker in the Seeker role in order to play it. That means she can only copy Seeker or neutral events with Eidetic Memory, since it does become an exact copy of the card, which includes the class of the card's class. Now, despite that limitation, Eidetic Memory it's a very interesting option for a Lola deck, if only to copy her signature event, which lets you not only switch roles, but also reduces the cost of the next card you play of that role by 3, and you also get to draw a card. The second restriction on Eidetic Memory is that the Insight event needs to be in an investigator's discard pile before you can copy it. This can be slightly problematic, but it's not an insurmountable challenge. Ideally, you'd like to play the event in question first, since you have to remove that event and Eidetic Memory from the game once you copy it. However, you could also commit that event to a skill test in a pinch, confident in the knowledge that you'll still have access to it once you draw your Eidetic Memory. If you're playing the Dunwich Legacy campaign, chances are good that the encounter deck will dump at least a couple of your Insight events into the discard pile before you can use them. So I quite like the idea of playing Eidetic Memory in the context of that campaign due to the discard mechanics that are prevalent throughout the scenarios. I've already mentioned the third restriction on Eidetic Memory, and that's once you copy an event with it, you have to remove that event and Eidetic Memory from the game. I'm afraid this is probably a necessary evil to keep the cards somewhat balanced. It really only becomes a problem if you manage to draw through your entire deck during a scenario, since you won't be able to play either card on your second time through. That doesn't really happen very often in my experience, but it is something to keep in mind, uh, especially if you expect a scenario to run a little bit longer than expected. Ultimately, the value of a card like eidetic memory really depends on the value of the card that you copy with it, and seekers really are spoiled for choice when it comes to powerful insight events. So eidetic memory is definitely worth a look if you think your deck would benefit from playing a third or even a fourth copy of a particular card. There are even a few good insight events outside of the Seeker class that are worth keeping an eye on, just in case they hit the discard pile if you're playing multiplayer. Eidetic memory lets you bend the game's deck building rules, which is potentially quite powerful, and the card's value is only going to go up as more insight events are released. I quite like this card. The second Seeker card in the pack is an upgrade for No Stone Unturned, a Seeker event from the Path to Carcosa Deluxe expansion. This version of No Stone Unturned will set you back 5 experience points and 2 resources. It has Wild and Intellect skill icons and the Insight trait. It has game text Fast. Play during any free triggered ability player window. Choose an investigator at your location. That investigator searches his or her deck for a card, draws it, and shuffles his or her deck. Tutors are certainly part of the Seeker color pie, so it really comes as no surprise that the class receives probably the most powerful tutor in the game in level 5, No Stone Unturned. 5 experience points is a significant investment, that is true, but this card lets you fetch any card from any investigator's deck at almost any point of the game. Does Roland Banks need his lightning gun to blast Umordoth? Done. Is Skids hoping to draw one of his powerful exceptional cards in his deck? Done. Do you need your signature card? Done. The possibilities here are really endless, especially in multiplayer. And if you need more than one card, you could always copy No Stone Unturned with the other card in this pack, Eidetic Memory. Now, rather than drone on about just how powerful this card is, I'd like to talk about when you can play it. And I'm referring to the free triggered ability player windows. If you're playing multiplayer with your friends, there are plenty of free triggered ability player windows during the investigation phase. However, it's worth remembering that there are several other times you could play this card. For example, you could play it between steps 3.2 and 3.3 of the enemy phase to fetch a dodge to cancel an impending attack. You could also play it between steps 1 and step 2 of the skill test to fetch a card to commit to said test. If you want to get really fancy, you could play No Stone Unturned to fetch Lucky Dice or Are They for a rogue who could then play them during that same player window with Joey the Rat Vigil to protect him or herself from a potentially fatal skill test. As I mentioned earlier, the possibilities for No Stone Unturned really are limitless, and that includes phases besides the investigation phase. I don't really have much more to say about No Stone Unturned. If you're spending 5 experience points to upgrade a card in your deck, you expect it to be powerful, and No Stone Unturned is hands down the most powerful tutor in the game. If you bring this card to a multiplayer game, you will be everybody's best friend, because everybody is going to want you to search for that key card in their deck. That's going to do it for my review of the Seeker cards in Dim Carcosa. Seekers do extremely well on this pack, picking up 2 cards that are going to find homes in many different decks. Seekers have a lot of very solid events with the Insight trait at all levels, so the class is really spoiled for choice when it comes to targets for Eidetic Memory. You may even want to consider Eidetic Memory if you're playing a LOLA deck, if only to copy her signature event, Improvisation. Now, Eidetic Memory does have some drawbacks since you can only target Insight events in the discard pile, and you need to remove Eidetic Memory and that event from the game. However, if your deck is good at drawing cards, and let's face it, draw is another ability that is in the Seeker color pie, those restrictions become a lot less onerous. As for No Stone Unturned, it'll fetch you any card at virtually any time, making it the most powerful tutor in the game. I've included the level 0 version of No Stone Unturned in several of my solo decks, but in my experience, I don't play it very often. That makes me a little bit wary of rushing out to pick up the level 5 version of No Stone Unturned, at least in solo. But if you're playing multiplayer, No Stone Unturned is really a great option to consider. Chances are extremely high that at least one deck, if you're playing in multiplayer, is going to get off to a slow start because it can't find the key pieces to its strategy, and No Stone Unturned can really solve that problem in a flash. That's going to do it for me today. If you'd like to contact me, I can be reached at manfromling@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromling. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.